In the summer of 1985, an entire state was living in fear. People were checking their locks twice. Neighbors were organizing patrols. Parents were warning their children not to go outside alone. The reason? A man investigators would eventually call the Night Stalker. His name was Richard Ramirez, and over the course of a year, he turned random homes across California into scenes of terror. What made him so frightening wasn't just what he did. It was the fact that nobody knew who he would target next. There was no clear pattern, no specific type of victim, no neighborhood that felt completely safe. And for months, police had almost no idea who they were looking for. This is the story of Richard Ramirez, one of America's most infamous criminals. Richard Ramirez was born in 1960 in El Paso, Texas. His childhood was complicated and surrounded by disturbing influences. As a young boy, Ramirez was exposed to violence and crime. And as a teenager, he began developing an obsession with dark subjects. One of the biggest influences on him was his older cousin, a Vietnam War veteran who showed him disturbing images and told him stories about violence. Over time, Ramirez became increasingly isolated and began using drugs while committing small crimes. Eventually, he moved to California, where his criminal behavior escalated. At first, his crimes were mostly burglaries, but in 1984, investigators began noticing a pattern of much more serious attacks. A predator was operating in California, and nobody knew who he was. The name Night Stalker came from the way Ramirez operated. He often entered homes while people were asleep, creating a feeling that no one was safe even inside their own bedroom. Unlike many serial offenders, Ramirez did not have a consistent victim profile. His victims were different ages, genders, and backgrounds. That unpredictability terrified the public. People couldn't understand how someone could seemingly choose victims at random. Every new report created more panic. News stations covered the case constantly. Police released information to the public, hoping someone would recognize the person responsible. But for a long time, Ramirez remained unidentified. The investigation became one of the biggest manhunts in California history. Detectives from multiple agencies worked together, comparing evidence and searching for connections between cases. One of the major breakthroughs came when investigators found evidence linking crimes together. Eventually, police were able to identify Richard Ramirez as their main suspect. His name and photograph were released publicly. The reaction was immediate. People across California recognized him from the news. Ramirez was no longer an unknown attacker hiding in the shadows. Now, he had a face. On August 31st, 1985, Ramirez returned to Los Angeles after his identity had been revealed. He quickly realized that people recognized him. When he attempted to escape, several civilians noticed him. A group of residents chased him, confronted him, and helped stop him until police arrived. The man who had caused months of fear was finally in custody. The investigation was over. But the trial was just beginning. Richard Ramirez's trial became a media event. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and prosecutors presented a large number of crimes connected to him. Throughout the trial, Ramirez gained attention for his unusual behavior and his attempts to portray himself as a dark, rebellious figure. However, the court focused on the evidence. In 1989, Ramirez was convicted on multiple charges and sentenced to death. He remained on death row for decades. Richard Ramirez remains one of the most recognizable criminals in American history. But the reason the case continues to interest people is not because of the person himself. It's because of the fear he created. The Night Stalker case changed how many people thought about safety. It showed how quickly a community can become terrified when a criminal seems unpredictable. It also showed the importance of investigation, cooperation, and public awareness in solving major crimes. Richard Ramirez died in 2013 while still on death row. But decades later, his name remains connected to one of California's darkest chapters. The story of Richard Ramirez is a reminder that behind every headline are real victims, real families, and real communities that had to live through unimaginable fear. The Night Stalker wasn't just a criminal case. It was a moment when thousands of people realized that danger could appear anywhere. And that is what made Richard Ramirez one of the most infamous criminals in American history. Most serial killers want to be remembered. They leave messages, chase attention, and enjoy the fear they create. But Israel Keyes was different. He didn't want fame. He wanted to disappear. For years, he lived a normal life in Alaska. He had a job, a home, and a daughter. To the people around him, he seemed like an ordinary person. But behind that image was a man who investigators believe carefully planned crimes across the United States. He avoided patterns, he avoided attention, and he tried to create what he believed was the perfect crime. This is the story of Israel Keyes. Israel Keyes was born in 1978 in Utah and later moved to Washington State with his family. His childhood was unusual, and as he got older, he became interested in survival, violence, and darker subjects. After high school, Keyes joined the United States Army. After leaving the military, he moved to Alaska, where he built a quiet life. He worked as a contractor and ran a small business. Nothing about him immediately stood out, and that normal appearance would later become one of the most disturbing parts of his story. Many serial killers follow a pattern. They choose similar victims. They operate in the same area. They leave clues behind. Israel Keyes tried to avoid all of that. He traveled across the country and carefully planned his actions far away from where he lived. Investigators later discovered that Keyes prepared supplies in advance and hid them in different locations. This allowed him to operate without creating obvious connections. There was no single city where police could focus. No clear pattern, no easy way to find him. For years, Keyes remained almost completely unknown. Everything changed in 2012 when 18-year-old Samantha Koenig disappeared from Anchorage, Alaska. Investigators began searching for answers, and evidence eventually led them to Israel Keyes. When police arrested him, they believed they had solved one case. But they soon realized they might have found something much bigger. During interviews, Keyes revealed information about his planning and admitted to crimes. The FBI became involved because they believed he could be connected to cases across multiple states. The investigation changed from finding one victim to trying to understand the full extent of what Keyes had done. One of the strangest parts of the case was how Keyes interacted with investigators. Instead of completely denying everything, he gave them information, but he controlled what he revealed. He would answer some questions while refusing to discuss others. Investigators knew they were talking to someone who had important answers, but they also knew they might never learn the entire truth. The FBI began looking into unsolved disappearances across the country, searching for possible connections. One of the biggest mysteries surrounding Israel Keyes is how many crimes he actually committed. Because he traveled often and avoided leaving patterns, investigators believe there may be victims who were never identified. Keyes designed his life around staying unnoticed. He didn't want attention. He didn't want recognition. He wanted to stay invisible. Before investigators could uncover every answer, Israel Keyes died in prison in 2012. His death ended the possibility of learning the full story directly from him. Today, he remains one of the most unusual and disturbing criminals in American history. Not because he wanted to become famous, but because he wanted the opposite. He wanted to be a person nobody noticed, and that is what made him so difficult to find. Even years later, one question remains: how much about Israel Keyes will never be known?